So Ezra Klein is sort of a resistance liberal icon. He, of course, was one of the founders of Vox. He's big on he's one of the data guys, kind of like Nate Silver. And I would argue his politics are basically like center left. I think the Democratic Party is a good representation of what a guy like Ezra Klein supports, standard, generic type Democrats. And so he came out and wrote an article basically saying, Biden's got to go. Biden's got to go. You got to replace him. We cannot roll the dice and potentially hand the country over to Trump. Let's stop kidding ourselves. Let's stop shoving our heads in the sand. We all know he's lost not just one step, he's lost multiple steps. We got to wrap it up here. And so look, it's a big deal. It's a big deal because it's one thing if somebody like Cenk Uygur comes out and says, Biden's got to go. He's been saying that for a year or two now, right? So everybody's like, that's expected of him. Even for somebody like me, it's not viewed as a big deal if I say Biden needs to step down because I'm viewed as a critic of him all along to one degree or another. So it's not, people go, well, of course a guy like Cenk would say that, or of course a guy like Kyle would say that. But for somebody like Ezra Klein, well, that's a different story because he's not Cenk Uygur and he's not Kyle Kulinski. He's like the exact key demographic and type of person and Democrat that should, in theory, be all in for somebody like Joe Biden and making those arguments at the moment. But he can't bring himself to do it anymore. He can't bring himself to say, yeah, this is the guy. Okay, so let's dive into this article and we'll break it down as we go. Democrats have a better option than Biden. It requires them to embrace an old-fashioned approach to winning a campaign. So he starts off by giving Biden a hot stone massage. That's what he does. So he says, my heart breaks a bit for Joe Biden. This is a man who has been running for president since he was young. He wins the presidency finally, unexpectedly, when he's old. And that age brought him wisdom. It's brought an openness that hadn't always been there in him. He's governed as a throwback to a time before I alone can fix it, a time when presidents were party leaders and coalition builders. Biden has held together a Democratic Party that could easily have splintered. Think back to the 2020 campaign when he beat Bernie Sanders, when he beat Elizabeth Warren, when his victory was seen as, in reality, the moderate wing triumphing over the progressive wing, the establishment over the insurgents. But instead of making them bend the knee, instead of acting as a victor, Biden acted as a leader. He partnered with Bernie Sanders. He built the Unity Task Force. He integrated Warren's and Sanders' ideas and staff into not just his campaign, but also his administration. All right, let me just pause to point out, obviously, we on the left view this quite a bit differently. We viewed the Unity Task Force as sort of a PR move to try to be like, bro, me, I love the left, bro. I don't know what you're talking about. In reality, it wasn't nearly as substantive as we would have liked it to be. But of course, Ezra Klein, since he's more of a Biden-type Democrat, he sees it as, oh, look at him bridging the divide, bringing together the centrists and the lefties. Isn't this glorious? So he views that through rose-colored glasses. Let's continue. I had a conversation recently with Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the House Progressive Caucus, and I asked her why the Democratic Party hadn't ruptured the way Republicans did. She pointed me back to that moment. Biden, she said, made the huge attempt to pull the Democratic Party back together before the 2020 election in a way I've never really seen before. Look, to be fair to Biden, what he did was way more strategically intelligent than what Hillary did, where Hillary just put her middle finger up to the left and said, go fuck yourself. I'm the only game in town, bitch. That's what she did. So Biden was definitely more sympathetic than Hillary was. Was it good? No, I don't think he did anywhere near enough substantively, but it was way better than what Hillary did. And it worked. Democrats had 50 votes in the Senate, 50 votes that stretched from Bernie Sanders on the left all the way to Joe Manchin on the right, Biden and Chuck Schumer. They often could not lose even one of those votes, and at crucial moments, they didn't. With that almost impossible to hold together coalition, the Biden administration and congressional Democrats passed a series of bills. The bipartisan infrastructure deal, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and Science Act. That will make this a decade of infrastructure and invention, a decade of building, of decarbonizing, of researching. They expanded the Affordable Care Act, and it worked. More than 21 million people signed up for the ACA last year, a record. They did what Democrats have promised to do forever and took at least the first steps toward letting Medicare negotiate drug prices. And the Biden team, they said they were going to run the economy hot, that at long last, they were going to prioritize full employment, and they did. And then inflation shot up, not just here, but in Europe, in Canada, pretty much everywhere. The pandemic had twisted global supply chains, and then the economy had reopened and people desperate to live again took their pandemic savings and spent. And the Biden team, in partnership with Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve, got the inflation rate back down, and we are still beneath 4% unemployment. And I don't want to just skip over that accomplishment. Most economists said that could not be done. The overwhelming consensus was we were headed for a recession, that the so-called soft landing was a fantasy. It got mocked as immaculate disinflation. But that is what happened. We didn't have a recession. We are still seeing strong wage gains for the poorest Americans. Inequality is down. Growth is quick. America is far stronger economically right now than Europe, than Canada, than China. You want to be us. And yet Biden's poll numbers are dismal. His approval rating lingers in the 30s. Most polls show him losing to Donald Trump in 2024. Then comes the special counsel report, which finds no criminal wrongdoing in his treatment of classified information, which is, remember, the question that the special counsel was appointed to investigate. But the counsel takes a drive-by on Biden's cognitive fitness. Says a jury would think him a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Says Biden doesn't remember when his son Beau died. And Biden, enraged, does what people have been asking him to do this whole time. He takes the age issue head on, and he gives a news conference full of fury. And then, when he's about to leave, he comes back to take one more question. This one on Israel and Gaza, where he says that America is no longer lockstep behind Benjamin Netanyahu's invasion, and then describing the effort he put in getting President Sisi to open the Egyptian border for aid, he slips. He calls Sisi the president of Mexico. Makes the kind of slip anyone can make, but a kind of slip he is making too often now. A kind of slip that means more when he makes it than when someone else does. Since the beginning of the Biden administration, I have been asking people who work with him, how does he seem? How read in is he? What's he like in meetings? Maybe it's not a great sign that I felt the need to do that a lot of reporters have been doing that, but still, am I convinced? And am I convinced watching him, listening to the testimony of those who meet with him, not all people who like him? I am convinced he is able to do the job of the presidency. He is sharp in meetings. He makes sound judgments. I cannot point you to a moment where Biden faltered in his presidency because his age slowed him down. But here's the thing. I can now point you to moments when he is faltering in his campaign for president because his age is slowing him. This distinction between the job of the presidency and the job of running for the presidency keeps getting muddied, including by Biden himself. This is the question Democrats keep wanting to answer. The question the Biden administration keeps pretending only to hear. Can Biden do the job of president? But that is not the question of the 2024 campaign. The insistence that Biden is capable of being president is being used to shut down discussion of whether he's capable of running for president. I've had my own journey on this. I've written a number of columns about how Biden keeps proving pundits wrong, about how he's proved me wrong. He won in 2020 despite plenty of naysayers. The Democrats won in 2022 defying predictions. I had in 2022 been planning to write a column after the midterms saying there should be a primary because Democrats need to see how strong of a campaigner Biden still was. The test needed to be run. But when they overperformed, that drained all interest among the major possible candidates in running. That test wasn't going to happen. But still, I thought Biden might surprise again. I'd grown wary of underestimating him. We had to wait till this year, till now really, to see Biden even begin to show what he'd be like on the campaign trail. And what I think we're seeing is that he is not up for this. He is not the campaigner he was, even 5 years ago. That's not insider reporting on my part. Go watch a speech he gave in Pennsylvania kicking off his campaign in 2019. And then go watch the speech he gave last month in Valley Forge, kicking off his re-election campaign. No comparison here. Both speeches are on YouTube, and you can see it. The way he moves, the energy in his voice. The Democrats denying decline are only fooling themselves. But even given that, I was stunned when his team declined a Super Bowl interview. Biden is not up by 12 points. He can't coast to victory here. He is losing. He is behind in most polls. He is behind despite everything people already know about Donald Trump. He needs to make up ground. If he does not make up ground, Trump wins. The Super Bowl is one of the biggest audiences you will ever have. And you just skip it? You just say no? The Biden team's argument, to be fair, is this. Who wants to see the president during the Super Bowl anyway? And even if they did the interview, CBS would just choose 3 or 4 minutes of a 15-minute interview to air. What if CBS chooses a clip that makes Biden look bad? That's all true. But that's all true in the context of a team that does not believe that the more people see Biden, the more they will like him. There's a reason other presidents do the Super Bowl interview. There's a reason Biden himself did it in 2021 and 2022. That Trump said he'd gladly take Biden's place this year. I was talking to James Carville, who's one of the chief strategists behind Bill Clinton's 1992 campaign, and he put this really well to me. He said to me that a campaign has certain assets, but the most desirable asset is the candidate. and the Biden campaign does not deploy Biden like he is a desirable asset. Biden has done fewer interviews than any recent president, and it's not close. By this point in their presidencies, Barack Obama had given more than 400 interviews, and Trump had given more than 300. Biden has given fewer than 100, and a bunch of them are softball interviews. He'll go on Conan O'Brien's podcast or Jay Shetty's, I don't even know who that is, mindfulness podcast. The Biden team says this is a strategy, that they need apolitical voters, the ones who are not listening to political media. But one, this strategy isn't working. Biden is down, not up. And two, no one really buys this argument. I don't buy this argument. This isn't a strategy chosen from a full universe of options. This is a strategic adaptation to Biden's perceived limits as a candidate. And what's worse, it may be a wise one. I want to say this clearly. I like Biden. I think he's been a good president. I think he is a good president. I don't like having this conversation. And I know a lot of liberals, a lot of Democrats are going to be furious at me for this show. But to say this is a media invention, that people are worried about Biden's age because the media keeps telling them to be worried about Biden's age. If you have really convinced yourself of that in your heart of hearts, I almost don't know what to tell you. In poll after poll, 70 to 80% of American voters are worried about his age. Now that's 86%, by the way. This is not a thing people need the media to see. It is right in front of them. And it is also shaping how Biden and his campaign are acting. Democrats keep telling themselves, when they look at the polls, that voters will come back to Biden when the campaign starts in earnest and they begin seeing more of Trump. When they have to take what he is and what it would mean for him to return seriously. But that is going to go both ways. When the campaign begins in earnest, they will also see how much more of Joe Biden. People who barely pay attention to him now. They will be watching his speeches. They will see him on the news constantly. Will they actually like what they see? Will it comfort them? That was why the news conference mattered. That news conference had a point. It had a purpose. The purpose was to reassure voters of Biden's cognitive fitness, particularly his memory. And Biden couldn't do that. Not for one night. Not for fewer than 15 minutes. And these kinds of gaffes have become commonplace for him. He recently said he'd been speaking to the former French president, Francois Mitterrand. When he met Emmanuel Macron, he said he'd been talking to the former German Chancellor, Helmut Kohl, when he met Angela Merkel. Guys, Mitterrand died in 1996. None of these matter much on their own. The human mind just does this, but it does it more as you get older, and they do matter collectively. Voters believe Biden is too old for the job he seeks. He needs to persuade them otherwise, and he is failing at that task. Arguably the central task of his reelection campaign. And that can become a self-fulfilling cycle. His staff knows that the news conference was a disaster. So how will they respond? What will they do now? They will hold him back from aggressive campaigning, even more from unscripted situations. They will try to make doubly sure that it doesn't happen again. But they need a candidate. Democrats need a candidate who can aggressively campaign because, again, I cannot emphasize this enough, they are currently losing. Part of my job is talking to the kinds of Democrats who run and win campaigns constantly. All of them are worried about this. None of them say that this is an invention or not a real issue. And this is key. It's not the age itself they are worried about. The age of 81 doesn't mean anything. It's the impression Biden is giving of age, of slowness, of frailty. The presidency is a performance. You are not just making decisions, you are also acting out the things that people want to believe about their president. That the president is in command, strong, energetic, compassionate, thoughtful. That they don't need to worry about all that is happening in the world because the president has it all under control. Whether it is true that Biden has it all under control, it is not true that he seems like he does. Some political strategists I know think that's why his poll numbers are low. That even when good things happen, people don't really think he did them. One was telling me that what worries him most about Biden is how stable his approval ratings is. It doesn't really go up or down. Inflation has gone down a lot in recent months. People feel a lot better about the economy. You can see that in consumer sentiment data. But Biden's approval rating, it has not gone up. His performance on Ukraine did not make it go up. The passage of the IRA and the CHIPS Act did not make it go up. To this strategist, it looked like a lot of Americans just don't give Biden credit for things, even when he deserves them. And Biden isn't now a capable or aggressive enough campaigner to win that credit for himself. The arguments I see, we'll wrap this up in a second. I'll give you a couple more because he responds directly to some of the arguments that you hear all the time. The arguments I see even some smart Democrats making, so they don't have to look at this directly, are self-defeating. The one I hear most often is that Trump is also old. He's 77. He also mixes up names. He recently called Nancy Pelosi Nikki Haley. He's sometimes speaking gibberish. And it's all true. But that is a reason to nominate a candidate who can exploit the fact that Trump is old and confused. The point is not to give Trump an even match. The point is to beat Trump. Another argument I see is that this is ageism. This is an unfair thing to point out about Biden. It is age discrimination. And I've seen people make this argument, age discrimination is illegal in the workplace. But it is not illegal in the electorate. If the voters are ageist and Biden loses because of it, there's no recourse. You cannot sue the voters for age discrimination. And then there's the argument you've heard on my podcast, an argument I've made before. Biden doesn't look like a strong candidate, but Democrats keep on winning. Biden won in 2020. Democrats won in 2022. They've been winning special elections in 2023. They just won George Santos' seat in New York. There's an anti-MAGA majority in this country, and they will come out to stop Trump. And I think that might be true. I still think Biden might win against Trump, even with all that I've said. It's just that there's a very good chance he might lose. Maybe even better than even odds. And Trump is dangerous. I want better odds than that. I think one reason Democrats react so defensively to critiques of Biden is they've come to a kind of fatalism. They believe it is too late to do anything else. And if it is too late to do anything else, then to talk about Biden's age is to contribute to Donald Trump's victory. But that's absurd. It's February. Fatalism this far before the election is ridiculous. Yeah, it's too late to throw this to primaries, but it's not too late to do something. So then what? Then he goes on to say basically what I've been saying, which is like, I want to see Jill Biden, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Biden's top staffers all sit him down and basically tell him, like, we love you, we support you, but we're going to go ahead and have to wrap it up now. We can't roll the dice with this in 2024. You got to go. So he makes that point. To be fair, the list he uses is a little different than my list of the people who I want to break it to him. And then he goes on to say, basically, when we get to the convention, Biden announces he's stepping aside. And then it's a throwback to the old school way that the system works, which is basically the delegates, the party leaders all get together and they decide who they want to be the next one. They decide who they want to be the nominee. And then they'll fight it out, right? You'll probably have some Kamala Harris loyalists, but then there'll be plenty of people who look at Kamala and realize her numbers are very bad as well. So, hey, maybe that's not the direction we want to go. You might have the likes of a Gavin Newsom or somebody like that who steps up to say, hey, I'll do it if you guys want me to do it. And then it'll be a matter of old school politicking and the leadership will pick. And then that will be the nominee. Now, to me, I would have much rather prefer everybody get their ducks in a row earlier, the conversation be had with Joe Biden earlier, and then you actually have a Democratic primary where the people get to pick who they want. That's how it's supposed to work. That's what I want. We're already past the deadline in so many states, though, and so that's not going to happen. And so in lieu of that, what Ezra Klein is talking about here, and now what many others are talking about, is the only option. Biden steps aside when it's basically at the convention, and then they get to pick who they want to be the standard bearer. And look, I'll come out and say it as well. I think he's right that that's better than having Biden be the standard bearer. I don't want to roll the dice. I don't want to take a chance. I think he's the weakest candidate. I honestly think even Kamala would be better now. I think Mayor Pete would be better now. In terms of electability, nobody could be worse on Palestine, the issue, right? Like, nobody could be worse. So if there's no difference there, okay, let's not go with the guy who's 1,000 years old who can't complete a sentence, right? When it comes to electability, I think he's our worst candidate. And so this is Ezra Klein coming out and saying it. I agree with what he's saying. I'd like a more democratic process to pick the person, but we're already past that. So if it's if it's Biden or party shenanigans, then I'm sorry. Party shenanigans wins, man. It just does. It just does. So now, here's the final point I want to make. The fact that somebody like Ezra Klein is now coming out and saying this, you guys know what that means, right? If you're at the point where the New York Times, I mean, they are the bastion of resistance, liberal, pro-Democrat talking points. If they're saying this, you bet your ass there's contingency plans being made. You bet your ass that they see it too. And this is a real conversation now. I mean, it literally may be 50-50 that Biden steps aside now. Like, it might actually happen. It might actually be flip a coin and we might end up getting a different candidate. Please let that happen. I cannot run the risk of Trump winning again, man. And with Biden, it's always going to be worse odds. So I'm sure he's getting a lot of pushback. Ezra Klein is from all different resistance liberal types and Bidenites. But over time, it's going to get less and less and less and less. It really is. And this is coming from a guy who literally laid out, I think Biden's been a phenomenal president. And then after that, he's like, and still, we can't do this, guys. This is crazy. So how many more are there out there exactly like Ezra Klein? How many in positions of power in the Democratic Party are there like Ezra Klein? So it's the first, little bit of light at the end of the tunnel here. Some hope to hang on to. I now think the conversation is real. When it makes it to the New York Times, when it makes it to the resistance liberal darling Ezra Klein, I now think it's real. I now think we might actually get a different candidate. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.